Okay. Right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I know it's a very difficult time for all of us because we're all absolutely rushed off our feet and incredibly busy. So I'm grateful for those of you who've made it this evening, and also because it is a absolutely glorious evening. And I'm sure if you're not out on the streets, then you'd probably like to be sitting in your gardens. But anyway, thank you all for being here, and also to the officers. I'm your chair, as you know, Councillor Rachel Carnack. The role of this committee is to scrutinise performance and financial reports from across all the council's services and make recommendations to Cabinet where necessary. This committee also deals with the call-in of Cabinet decisions and decides whether these decisions should be referred back to the decision maker to think again. There's no fire alarm planned for this evening, but should it sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. And as I think you will know, two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. And please muster at Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of this meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. This meeting is being minuted, recorded and audio streamed via the council's website. The Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked at sunset, so members of the public, and we have Graham, thank you Graham for being here this evening, should leave by the side exit behind the glass door. Also present this evening, we have Councillors Alan Baldock, Leader of the Council, and also Councillor Connie Nolan. And fortunately, Councillor Charlotte Cornell and Councillor Pip Hazelton are unable to attend, but they are going to take notes from their colleagues, and also I will contact them if there's anything that comes up from this meeting. And thank you, Robin, as well. Welcome. And they are members of the Cabinet, and they may be asked questions by the members of the committee during the course of the debate, if we so wish. So apologies for absence first. Pippa, please.
Apologies received from Councillors Brady, Carr-Ellis, Castle and Howes.
Thank you very much. And any
No substitutes this evening.
And any declarations received in advance?
None in advance, Chair.
Okay, and there are no public speakers for this evening. So the first thing is then the minutes of the meeting, which was held, seems like a lifetime ago, on the 28th of February. Yes. Councillor Turnbull.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I just need to make a declaration, I think, of my daughter working for the council as bar staff these days. So since we're talking about workforce, thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Well remembered. Can we agree?
I was going to make the declaration when the relevant item came up. I'll do it now. I work in a business on St George's Street. That's for the Levelling Up fund bit.
Okay, thank you as well. And so anyway, back to the minutes. Can we agree the minutes then of the meeting held on 28th of February as a true record? Okay, that's agreed. Thank you. So we move on to our first report this evening, which is pages 10 to 16, which is the annual workforce report. And we're noting the report of the head of human resources, and presenting this evening is Charlie Greenway, who's head of human resources. And we also have Councillor Nolan here in case there are any questions that arise that you would like to ask Councillor Nolan about. Thank you very much, Charlie.
Thank you, Councillor Carnack. Good evening. You might remember I last presented to you last autumn, and at that time you wanted me to come back, but we agreed that it would be in line with the normal kind of financial cycle of the organisation, so I would present back to you the end of year position, if you like, for 23-24. So that's the report that you have in front of you. I guess in summary, for me, it's been a year of stabilisation within the organisation. We concluded our organisational change programme, which was restructuring throughout the organisation. We have progressed significantly on the recruitment challenges that we've had, filling the majority of our vacancies to a good level now, and also stabilised our turnover, which were two areas that were of concern a couple of years ago for the council. There is one area of the report that I have noticed there is an error in, and that is on our sickness absence rate. It's slightly better than reported in the report. I had a 3% absence rate for this last year. It was actually 2.5%. So apologies, my calculations there. In terms of looking forward, the outlook from a labour force perspective is still slightly challenging, although stabilising in general for us. There are still significant challenges over certain job roles and technical professional skills and attracting those people into the public sector. And for us, clearly, we're going to have a year of accommodation moves and change for the staff within the organisation, but we're clearly moving our focus over the next year to medium and longer term planning for our workforce and staff development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for, yes, Councillor Mellish?
Yeah, my apologies. Maybe this is something I should know, but do we have a qualified IOSH safety officer? Because that's sort of the accident element and sort of the management of accidents and ill health don't seem to be mentioned in this report. Having spent a lifetime in occupational health and safety myself, I always find that they are kind of key to the way in which an organisation develops and can expand its organisation and keep its workforce safe as well, but also encourages them to be more included in the work of the council because they feel they're being looked after, and it also kind of feeds them into the organisation properly. So I just wonder, maybe my question is, can we see a report about occupational health and safety at a later date, and perhaps just a quick report now about how that's been approached at the moment?
Do you want to do that, Charlie, or does Councillor Nolan want to? No?
I'll make a response now. Yes, we do have IOSH qualified staff within the organisation. They don't fall within my remit for HR, if you like, which is why they're omitted from my report, and they have a different reporting mechanism. And I know they do report through. Kind of looking at Alexis here, because it comes under her area very conveniently. That's as far as I can probably go.
Yeah, thank you.
So we have a corporate health and safety team with 3 staff in that team, and the senior within that team is suitably qualified to do that. He does and can provide statistics and reports if required. We tend to report those back internally through management team, so we do that on a regular basis. So I'd be happy to share that. I think those reports are actually, the statistics are available for councillors, or were available for councillors, but I can reshare anything more recent if you would like it.
Again, just very briefly, it would be good to see some sort of, again, within the context of human resources, again, in terms of the context of the corporate plan, some KPIs for health and safety and what you wish to achieve and how that fits into the management of the organisation. Because that's the role I think that health and safety plays. It's not just a matter of keeping people safe. It's about how it plays into the organisation and management of in our case, the council. Having been a council safety officer in the past as well, so I know where it plays into the organisation. So I'd like to see some sort of, perhaps not now, of course, but perhaps at a later meeting of this committee, we could have some sort of report on KPIs and health and safety.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's also a natural reporting method through something called the Staff Joint Health and Safety Committee. So if and when there's a need arise where either the staff base, particularly with through Unison, or the council as the employer base have an issue they need to raise, particularly on health and safety matters, it goes through that, which has representatives of the staff base, the recognised union and councillors as well. So that can be called on at any time to deliver on anything on an ad hoc basis. So even if there's not a regular reporting method, there is a reporting method for as and when needed.
And I think Councillor Mellish as well, you mentioned the new corporate plan and KPIs. And I think the interesting thing with that will be that the KPIs will start to come through in the next few months once Cabinet's agreed those. So I think that will give us an opportunity then to look at those KPIs and as a committee decide which ones maybe in this report tweak some of these, because I think what's interesting is this is when I was cabinet member for this and brought this report through, and it was post-pandemic and going through a very difficult time. And there's a lot of this that's stabilised now. So it might be that we want to see different information in the next report coming next year. So I think we'll bear that in mind and note that. Thank you. Councillor Prentice.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the page 12, where the different contract types are listed and headcount, I'm just looking at the line for 0 hours and staff who are on 0 hours contracts. I'm assuming those staff mainly work in hospitality type roles where you may have an event or something that requires people to be serving food and drink. What is the sort of fundamental difference between people who are on those types of arrangements compared with casual contracts? Because I suppose looking at possible mood music nationally, if we do move away from 0 hours contracts in the economy sort of more broadly, does it not make sense to ask if those people who are currently on 0 hours contracts would like to go onto a minimum, say, I don't know, 10 hours a week or whatever it is that gives them a guaranteed income? And have we asked what people who are on those contracts would like to do in the future?
Thank you. We keep quite a close eye on our 0 hours contracts. They are used exactly as you say, specifically in our culture, leisure area. And as the numbers show, there's relatively few of them in the organisation. They suit the people that are employed on them at the moment, and they suit the parts of the organisation that uses them. Clearly, we've got an eye to any possible new legislation that might come in, but they work well for us where they are at the moment. The difference between the 0 hours and the casual contracts are that casual is a lot less stable than 0 hours. So 0 hours are treated as employees, casuals are workers. So 0 hours get things like sick leave and the continuity of service that casual staff don't get. So there's a little bit more stability for them there. There's no guaranteed hours, but in all of the areas that we're using at the moment, there are generally every week, every month hours for those staff, and they know what's coming up. It's just we can't predict exact need.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Charlie. And Councillor Mackenzie, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed, I looked in the report for mention of pay and salary bands and how they may have changed over time. Do you have any information to hand about how, I understand there's different roles and each one will have a different salary, but do you have any information about the average and how they've gone up or down in time? And if not, as Councillor Carnac just said, like, could it be included in a future report, salaries and stuff like that? Thank you.
I'm really sorry, I'd make it up if I started quoting stats on salaries here and now. So really I can't, but I'm happy to kind of have a look at providing something in future.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That would be helpful. And Councillor Watkins. Councillor Turnbull first before Councillor Watkins. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I note the areas where you're having difficulty recruiting, and finance, legal and air quality. I'm just wondering what impact that's having and what you're doing to try and recruit to those areas. Thanks.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find the section of the report where I've listed those particular. It's a mixed picture. In some areas, we're continuing to try, and we have since been successful since my writing of the report. And in other areas, the managers and the heads of service are looking at being a little bit more creative, using people in different ways, bringing in different skills to kind of compensate. So mixed bag across those, but we don't give up. we still have to deliver, and we still have to kind of engage with those services and use staff differently.
Thank you. And Councillor Watkins.
Thanks, Chair. I do have a question. In fact, I had two, but only one now, because on the 0 hours point, I think you've kind of answered the question, but I would make one point on that before I move on to the question I had. I think on 0 hours, you've kind of outlined quite well where we've got to with those contracts. This government has removed unfair 0 hour contracts, which is where they weren't reciprocating the flexibility between the employee and the employer. So that's been banned. So if the employer has flexibility, now so does the employee. And I think that was a fair change to make. But I'm familiar with needing to use 0 hour contracts in companies I've been involved with. And it's interesting that, as you say, the council has the same perspective on it. Generally, actually now, the employees want the employees want that flexibility. So it comes as much from them as it does from the employer. And obviously where you've got issues around like leisure services, where things like weather can change your need for a worker at very short notice, if you don't retain that flexibility in a contract like 0 hours, you just have people sitting around twiddling their thumbs, and that's not much good. But of course, you might, within the council, we might be able to redeploy those people where that happens. So I think it's just an area to keep scrutiny on, given that we know what might well be coming down the track. I don't think it's a good idea to to outlaw 0 hours, but if that happens, I guess we've just got to think about it. I'm actually more worried about the small businesses in our district, which have most of their staff on those contracts because they're purely leisure or weather-based businesses, and they would really suffer. My question, I've just noticed the headcount's gone up about almost 10% in the year, and I think it's great that we've closed off a lot of those vacancies, and I know it's a similar picture at Kent County Council as well. Just the recruitment market's got a bit easier for employers, hasn't it, in the last year? Where's most of that growth come? Because obviously we hear a lot of narrative that across the whole country that councils under a lot of pressure. So I suppose when I saw that, just my eyebrow raised a little bit, that actually we are increasing our head count, and that's probably a good thing. I was just curious to know where we're managing to grow the council functions.
I don't think there's any growth of functions. I think it's filling the gaps that we had. At our worst point, we had about a 30% vacancy rate when we were right in the middle of our restructuring and holding vacancies, so that we created the flexibility we needed to deploy into the restructures. So those numbers are about filling the vacancies that we had rather than growth.
The question, I get that. The question would still stand. Those 41 extra people who we've hired, and I appreciate that was actually filling vacancies, but nonetheless, that's still 41 more people. Which departments have managed to increase their headcount?
Well, much more recently, our finance team have managed to recruit to the tricky vacancies they had. Legal are starting to see movement. They've had really sticky vacancies. Our case officer teams, which kind of are at all levels of the organisation dealing with the day-to-day operations of the council, they had quite significant vacancies when they were formed as part of the restructure. I mean, I could go on. There literally is one or two here, one or two there, one across the council. I don't think there was any area that evaded having vacancies that were difficult and at a level that were difficult at one or other point in time.
Thank you, Charlie. And yes, Councillor Dupe.
Sorry, I've only just got my breath back. I just wanted to applaud the use of apprenticeships and the increase in those. Is there a plan to increase those year on year? So one cohort passes and some more come on? So yeah, is the apprenticeships going to increase, basically?
Absolutely, yes, we would love to. We, we understand the value and we know the value of apprenticeships. Our challenge always is being able to manage, support and enable them to do their apprenticeship. Obviously, we employ them full-time, but they're not there as capacity full-time. So there is an overhead for the organisation, overhead for the teams and overhead for the managers every single time we bring on apprentices or enable apprenticeships. I think the numbers that we have at the moment are just about capacity for us, but that doesn't mean to say as some finish, we won't be able to cater for kind of keeping that level, I would hope, as we move through.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Duke, because that was something I wanted to ask about apprenticeships as well, because I think the differentiation between permanently employed staff and staff employed for the duration of their apprenticeships is also something that's interesting, and whether how many apprenticeships we're actually then being able to permanently employ those people, so we've got that continuity through the council workforce as well, which is really important to begin to make it a bit more robust again from the depletion that we saw in the past few years. So are you able to give us any indication, Charlie, on the sort of the differences between permanent employment and an apprenticeship?
In the main, the majority of our apprentices at the moment are in permanent jobs. And doing the apprenticeship as part of their training in those jobs. We do have some apprentices that are only taken on for the period of their apprenticeship. That works really well. And in the main, again, we manage to recruit them into the organisation at the end of their apprenticeship. Might not be exactly into the role they've been doing or the service they've been doing, but they get a taste of the council, they enjoy it, they see the opportunities, and they make applications to stay with us. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. And if we don't have any more questions on that, then I'd like to thank you very much, Charlie. We need to note this, and I think we've got a couple of points then. We want to see some more health and safety information on the workforce and also salary information. And I think probably keeping an eye on the 0-hour contracts. And I think also apprenticeships, it would be, sorry, I'm using my voice a bit, it's hay fever. It would be also interesting on the apprenticeship side to focus on that as well. But I think overall, it's really pleasing to see the position that the council is finding itself in terms of recruitment and retention. And I think also the department coming back in-house into the council has made a big difference as well in terms of that. So can we note this report then? Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to add, or is everyone content with that? Okay, so we're okay to note? Yeah, okay, I'd like to thank you very much then, Charlie, for being here this evening and answering the questions. Right, we now move on to Annual Corporate Plan Performance Report 23-24, which is pages 17 to 33. And again, this is a report to note, and our presenting officer is Caroline Marlowe, who's Head of Digital Data and Improvement. So I'd like to, and also Councillor Alan Baldock is here. Thank you, Councillor Nolan. Good night. And Councillor Alan Baldock is here if anyone has any questions they'd like to raise with him. So Caroline, if you would like to make your report, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, gosh. Sorry, shocked me a little bit. Very old photograph. As has been mentioned actually already this evening, this is the final annual report of the outgoing corporate plan. So we're in the process of starting to look at what this reporting mechanism will look like and what KPIs will be and everything for the new corporate plan. But nonetheless, let's finish out strong. It's been an interesting year. on both a kind of local and national scale, but particularly locally. The first half of the year, as we know, was marked by industrial action by Kanenko staff. So there will be anomalies, particularly around that performance measure. And the second half of the year, again, as we're all very familiar, we were hit with a cyber incident, so that's affected us and other authorities. So that will mean, unfortunately, that there are likely to be more outliers, just simply because some of the data was unavailable or was not been, was able to be captured in the same way. Nonetheless, my kind of intention is really to talk this evening directly about some of the highlights and some of the outliers, and then of course take questions. So broadly, globally, it was a good year. So we achieved or exceeded more of our targets compared to last year. Mostly, I have to say, not just because my colleagues are sat in front of me, due to an improvement in the housing KPIs, in particular the increase from 25 to 50%. Pardon me. So being able to reduce rent arrears in this environment is impressive. Other highlights. Actually, excuse me. I'm just going to cough. Very sorry. I meant to point out at the beginning, there is an error. There's an error in the report. If you look at the Protect measure 4.4D, the number of FPNs is erroneously put at 9 for 23-24. The correct value is actually 37. So my apologies for that. As it transpires, this was a direct result of the cyber incident, and our data reporting sheet wasn't up to date because we weren't able to access Uniform, but fortunately the service kept a local record of that, and Marie's nodding, so that's correct. So sorry, I meant to draw attention to that initially. But there, in PNs, there's been a reduction year on year, and also from Q3 to 4 in the number of notices issued for fly tipping, littering and ASB. So that would suggest that the increase in the fine level is acting as a deterrent. Excuse me. In terms of sort of a couple of outliers, so in parking, the average parking time in the coastal towns reduced significantly in the second half of this year, which brought down overall averages for the year. It's not particularly clear why that happened. There doesn't seem to be anything kind of environmentally or macro-environmentally, other than the weather potentially was nicer in 22-23. Kanenko and on the waste collection, obviously I've mentioned that was affected by strikes in Q2 and cyber incident, which meant that quite a bit of the data unfortunately was unusable for some of these KPIs. So in some, that's kind of reflected in both improvements and decreases in some of those figures. If you've got specific questions, we can pick those up. And there was a particularly positive result in planning enforcement cases, open versus closed. Percentage rate, very high, because actually that's a housekeeping incident. Throughout the year, the service has gone in and closed off, which had historically been long resolved but not officially marked as completed. So there's been lots of housekeeping kind of done by services throughout all of this. As well. I'm really sorry. Actually, I'm going to stop trying desperately to talk and then take questions, if that's okay, after a brief pause for another cough.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Caroline. I hope you're all right. Doesn't sound too good. Well, anyway, see, Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair. I completely understand why the KPIs in Appendix 2 weren't in the report, but I do find that these are very important things. So I was just asked, my first question, I've got two, sorry. So my first question is, will we have another opportunity as soon as possible to discuss the KPIs in Appendix 2 when the data is available to be updated on them and discuss them? The second question I wanted to ask is the park and ride use included in the figures for the average stay in the ANPR car parks KPI? Yeah, thank you.
Caroline?
I think the answer to question 2, your second question, is yes. Obviously, yes, including the one which is as most recently opened. Appendix 2, I'm still trying to find. Yes, if that data is available as soon as it becomes available, it may be that there's still some backlog on some of those. Some of those were not meant. Some of the KPIs not reported on are actually biennial, every 2 years, as opposed to each year. But if there are, if there's a request from the committee that we can bring those forward, then I'm sure that that's something that we can look to do.
Yeah, and before you come back, just to say that we do have a report coming on Park and Ride, and that will be in September. So we'll get all the information in that as well, and then we can see what we want to do with that report and carry forward. Sorry, Councillor Mackenzie.
Oh God, my voice box just stopped for some reason. Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask a follow-up question on the second question. The Canterbury parking stay was higher than Whitstable and Ham Bay. Is the park and ride use potentially responsible for the parking stay to be longer in Canterbury?
I don't have the raw data in front of me. However, one could feasibly opine that would make sense, bearing in mind, the reduced kind of effectively the reduced hourly rate for doing that. But again, we can look at that. And again, as Councillor Carnac said, I know there is a report coming specifically on Park and Ride. But yes, that would make sense. I would suggest, bearing in mind the proliferation of park and rides here as opposed to the coastal towns.
Yeah, and we should get some much better data on that as well. So it won't be amalgamated. We'll be able to. I hope we don't have to try and extrapolate it from that, because that's going to be a bit complicated. So we should get some better data than that. So thank you, Councillor Turnbull, and then Councillor Prentice, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the fixed penalty notices of a PSPO breach, which of course is, it's a low number. Pardon? Can you hear me? Am I off track? Yeah, it's all okay. Yes, PSPOs. Enforcement. Yeah, there's quite a low number of fines issued, which is it's one of those things, isn't it? We can never quite judge, is that because the PSPOs are sort of stopping people from doing things, or is that because they're not being caught when they do things? And also this possibility, I'd like to think that enforcement officers will alert people to the fact they are breaching something, and then they have an opportunity to amend their behaviour. And I wondered if you sort of capture that, because obviously we do want to sort of review how these things are, how effective these things are. I'm just wondering how sort of data is collected in terms of incidences of breaches, etc. Thanks.
I might defer to my esteemed colleague, actually, Maria. She's sat in front of me nodding. I think she's got a good answer for you.
The trouble with having short arms. Yeah, I mean, with the fixed penalty notices are one of the tools that we've got in the toolbox. So if there's an issue about antisocial behaviour, if there's an environmental issue, we can issue community protection notice warnings, we can issue community protection notices, as well as issuing fixed penalty notices. So we do capture all that data, and as you're aware from previous meetings, we have a contractor who supports us with fixed penalty notices. So as part of the monitoring, we have tied in the number of warnings, so educate, engage, that we actually do with members of the public, because that's always our first approach. It is about changing behaviour. It is about explaining that something is in breach, or if somebody's doing something wrong, to correct behaviour. So we do have records of that. When you look at the 37 that have been issued, a number of those have been around waste, so the waste management, people not putting out the rubbish in the correct way and it littering the streets. Some of that has been around the new city PSPO and the delivery riders. That was a particular issue that many councillors felt strongly about. So we have issued fixed penalty notices with delivery drivers, as well as issuing warnings. We've done a number of operations in the city centre, and the latest one, I think we gave out 7 warnings. We issued 14 fixed penalty notices, and the police actually seized 2 electric bikes and 2 electric scooters. So yes, fixed penalty notice is just one tool in the toolbox, but we do have that data.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Prentice, and then...
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions that relate to the KPIs under 2.1 and so on. Just regarding 2.2, I'm going to assume that the target that's been missed for the percentage of all repairs completed on time can be attributed to the fact that in April we moved from Mears being the contractor to the contractor that I've forgotten the name of because it's quite new. What's that? Sorry, Cardo. That's it. I would assume also that when the previous contractor realised they weren't getting renewed, they sort of gave up, for want of a better description. So I think we can understand that. And if you could clarify, that would be great. And regarding 2.8, that's obviously a fair bit below the target for the percentage of garage units you let. Now, I'm just thinking on my own ward in Suffolk Road, there is a block of garages that are fenced off, and there's quite a lot of sort of weeds growing around them, and they look as if they are out of use. Are they very much designated out of use and therefore won't be included in these figures? Or are we maybe inadvertently including some garage blocks in these figures? I'm just interested because I think I look at the garage blocks around the Spring Road estate, Spring Lane estate, and they don't look well used. They're boarded up, and so are they being included in these figures sort of accidentally? And should they be? Is my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prentice. Yes, Marie, do you want to answer that? And I think this crosses over into the next report then as well, doesn't it? But we'll deal with it now because I know garages are a bugbear for all of us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, with the Mears contract, yes, there was a tailing off of performance. However, we weren't able to get the data on the last 2 months from them because they experienced technical issues during that time. So, we've reported what we can, but some of it was impacted through technical issues. And I'm sure some of it, the performance would have petered off. You would expect that from an outgoing contractor to, for the changeover. I mean, with the garages, it's a really interesting one because we don't hold garages as policy voids, which we do with our general stock. So maybe there is something around the classification and what we count in numbers. I think with the garages, it's something that's on our to-do list for this year. It's a priority for us this year. We in terms of the garages and how we rent them, how we let them, we did a piece of work it was a small sites work. So we've looked at all our garage sites. We've looked at sites where it needs significant investment for these sites to bring them up to use. We've looked at how they are being used, and we've looked at the resource that's needed to manage the garages. So there's a number of sites where we've actually
gone out to external consultants and got feasibility studies on them to see whether or not what the site potential is, what the offer could be, and how it could be used in a different, more productive way in terms of either infills with housing or other opportunities. Garages are really expensive to maintain and upkeep. It's an ageing stock. And the piece of work that we'll be doing is looking at what we want to retain, what we want to either sell or look at as a development opportunity, and how the garages are going to be managed in the future, and whether or not that should be in-house or whether it should be outsourced. So that's a piece of work that we've got planned for this year.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back. I think that's a really helpful, useful response, actually, because looking at the garage stock we have, again, looking at Spring Lane, obviously an estate built in the 1960s, early 70s, when cars were a lot smaller for a start, and you didn't have the large vehicles that you tend to have today. I occasionally get residents asking, can certain garages be brought back into use? But I think a lot of the time what residents are looking for is somewhere maybe to store gardening tools and gardening equipment quite reasonably, because the houses don't necessarily, and the flats don't necessarily have the space. And I suppose more generally is the question of what we do with our garages. Is that something that can come to this committee? Because there does, if you do, I don't know if we've got a figure for the sort of the square footage of garage estate that we have, but it is clearly a lot of land that's not being used to its full potential. So is the work that you've done, could that come to this committee so we can look at it in a bit more detail?
Yeah, so as Peter's saying, so go to ONS, the strategy first of all, which would be, again, we're waiting obviously for the new KPIs, but I think one of the things is, as Councillor Mackenzie said as well, we want to see some continuity from these KPIs into the next KPIs. We don't want to just shut these down and then start all over again, because that's going to, these are fairly new KPIs as well, and we can see some useful progression in them. And I think on the garages, yes, once any policy is adopted, and I know that we were working on policy before, so there's a lot of work that's been done on garages, and I say bugbear because it has been something that's carried through for a number of years now on what do we do with them. And I think it would be a good focus for this committee, particularly in terms of housing, to actually look at the regeneration development and whatever, and be able to scrutinise that and make sure that in this term we actually do something about these garages rather than it's carried on into the next term of the council, because that's very much what's been happening. It's been going from one term to another. So yeah, we need to try and find a solution in this term, council term, rather than it dragging on into the next one, I think, if that's okay with you, Marie, as well. Okay, so we'll note that then. So thank you, Councillor Prentice. So Councillor Mellish, please.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. This is about the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. I wonder whether you could expand a little bit on this, because it seems a very ambitious project or programme, and which I welcome, of course. But I wonder who you're working alongside in doing this. I'm assuming this is not an entirely internal project. Particularly, we're going to contact 370 local business people, the 1,000 you want to get into 200 adult jobs, etc. And I'm wondering what outside contracts you're using, whether you're working with Aspire and Kent Business School, which are sort of one of the things that I would obviously be focusing on. Can you give us a bit more detail about how that's been progressed?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mellish. I think that's a really important point, and I think come back to that after this, because Shared Prosperity Fund is a really big part of alongside the Levelling Up Fund. And I think, although there was a briefing on it a little while ago, I think it's something where we could again do with some regular updates coming through. So Caroline, if you're able to answer that, please.
Actually, that's one of mine. So yeah, I won't ask Marie to do this one. I mean, there's not to in any way kind of obfuscate the question, Councillor Mellish, but there, as Councillor Carnac says, there's a lot to it. It's a really exciting project or programme, a series of projects. And depending on the which of the strands you're kind of talking about, yes, we are working in partnership, and we've commissioned various different agencies to support us. In fact, there's a very small nucleus of council officers that are developing the project, and in the main, you know, there's stuff that's been done through partnership or outsourced work. You know, it features in here in terms of looking ahead to that new corporate plan, and actually officers are in the middle of an exercise now of mapping both the Levelling Up Fund and the UK Shared Prosperity Fund outputs to that local plan to see how we could quantify those in terms of kind of metrics for performance indicators, and supporting kind of that transition from one corporate plan to the next. So I, and actually even more ably my colleague Nick Churchill, who I know you know very well, would be very keen, I think, to come and probably do an update on that report in the same way as we currently do with Levelling Up Fund to this committee, and I think that would be very valuable and actually help us to shape it as it goes through, because it's one of those where I'll be cautious what I say. Whilst whilst the skeleton of it is very much fixed, there is room to kind of to look to mould it, I guess, as we go through. Yeah, so it's a really good little fund. That's it's a really good fund and a really good series of projects. So I'm very happy to take that away.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, because it's cropping up against KPIs a little bit, and it sort of gives you a little bit of a taster, but you think, right, well, what else is there that, you know, we're not getting a full picture on? So if everyone sort of agrees with that, then I think it would be a very useful thing as we sort of step change through from one set of KPIs to another, that alongside the LUF, we're also looking at the Shared Prosperity Fund and how that's impacting, and also how it's working and that it's successful, because yeah, it's a lot of money coming into the district, and we need to make sure that it's being properly used and benefiting businesses and residents. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mellish. Councillor Watkins.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's a really good report. So thank you for everyone who put in many painstaking hours to produce it, I'm sure. I, with my environmental hat on, I actually had a couple of comments. I think, as you noted, and it's probably inevitable given the bin strike, the recycling rate dropped right down. And so, you know, we've got to keep giving that attention to see what the legacy of the strike is. You know, does behaviour revert quite quickly to what it used to be, and hopefully we get an upward trend, or does it stay at a lower level, having residents having necessarily learnt some bad habits? The question on the environment was, do you know what the 3 completed climate change actions were? And then my bigger question, I suppose, more general, is, you know, this is a good report, and I like having this kind of level of data and information to look at. I'm conscious that the corporate plan is changing a lot going forward, and am I right to, and essentially it's becoming kind of more qualitative, I suppose there might be a way of describing it, more kind of high level on sort of higher level outcomes, rather than drilling down into the sort of detail of specific services and the targets we're setting them. Does that mean we won't get this report anymore? Will you report against the new corporate plan, and just, are you able to give us a feel for what that's going to look like, given that whereas things like a goal is, I think one of them might be alleviating hunger in the district. It's not, you know, a very worthy thing that we can all agree on. How do you actually report against that? So yeah, just to let us know what's coming, because yeah, as I repeat again, I think this is a good report, and I hope we're not losing all of the data in future.
Yeah, so the new report, we're not structured yet, but it won't lose the intricate detail. So the idea of the UN goals is to give us big targets to think about. So we're thinking globally, acting locally. The acting locally is what we're measuring, not the acting globally. So it's the acting how we act locally to achieve the bigger global market. So nothing changes, to be quite honest about it. We will measure things that are relevant to moving towards achieving our local targets, which will move towards the national targets, the global targets, if you like. So nothing really changes. I think possibly a little bit misunderstood what we're aiming on that, but it's very clear in the corporate plan that you had the other week about that particularly strategic level. And I think it's fairly clear in that report as well.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Caroline, you...
Yes, to the, I'm not going to in any way dispute the leader of the council, but I would just obviously, as I mentioned previously, that piece of work is in the process of being developed, Councillor Watkins, and absolutely we will look for proxies in the same ways we've done previously. I think it's an interesting point that the kind of it is perceivable as more qualitative, but absolutely that's our job as the kind of performance and improvement team to look at how we do quantify some of those outcomes into outputs and so forth, and we can look at logic frameworks and all the tools that we use to do that. And again, there is, I've had no understanding from the administration that we're looking to cease reporting on some of these metrics again, which are of value. So it's a big exercise, and I absolutely can't tell the answer. But in terms of the process from the officer side of developing it, we are very cognizant of all of those factors, and then watch this space. Your question around the three, I'm afraid. Oh. Peter Davies can answer that. But just quickly to your very first point. Just wanted to make a note. Obviously, it's there in the report around the reduction in recycling rate, and indeed green waste, because that was deprioritised in order to get the smelly stuff out of the streets. But off the back of that, the teams have responded, and the contracts team in partnership with the comms team have put a huge campaign together. And what we're hoping is in the usual. Oh, nearly going to cough again. In the usual run of these things and how that kind of marketing lag works, we expect to see the benefits of those in the next financial year. So again, we'll be monitoring that in terms of the evaluation of that campaign. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Actually, I don't remember this off the top of my head, but it did come to scrutiny sub back in November in detail. So it was workplace charge points, which were ones at Military Road, now going to be relocated. I'm scrolling, so bear with me. Decarbonise heat from 3 leisure centres by 2022. That was completed for Herons, Whitstable and Kingsmead. Some of that's being delivered currently as part of the Kingsmead project. And PAS 2035 and PAS 2038, domestic and non-domestic expertise for retrofit design within the engineering, property and regeneration teams sort of being brought in, particularly to help. And some of that's evidenced through the Elvis House retrofit, but that was brought in, and we have I think people across the business now that are trained up to those levels. So there are the 3 areas that were completed as part of the Climate Change Action Plan.
Thank you. And Councillor Jupe.
At the end, in Appendix 2, there's KPIs not included in this report. Is that data available to the public, to us? Anyone?
Yes, and again, I think a similar question that Councillor Mackenzie raised earlier. I'll have to double check, but some of those are not due to be reported annually and every other year. But if that data exists, I can make sure the committee does get a record of it. And if it doesn't exist, we can or if it doesn't exist for this year and is due in the following year, we can certainly get you the most up to date metrics on that.
Thank you. I was just mentioning it because I know not everything can be included, but some of those would be a little bit more interesting to everyone. But yeah, I was listening earlier, I promise.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, again, this report is to note. I'd like to thank you. I agree, Councillor Watkins and others. It's a really good report. It's very interesting. It's got a lot of detail, but I agree, Councillor Jupe. Yes, if we had that KPI report as well, but it depends when the KPIs are being reported, of course. But that would be helpful. And I don't, obviously we don't want to lose this because we need to have that step basically between these KPIs and any new KPIs, and I think then we'll have to work our way through that. So I think one of the things will be actually then which reports are coming and how they come. That will be important, so that it might be, Councillor Duke, that some of the KPIs that aren't in these at the moment, they'll be coming in other reports. So yeah, we just want to make sure we're not missing anything. I think that's the important thing, that through the year, we don't get through the year and then realise we've missed a whole load of data. So that will be something for us to keep an eye on. But thank you very much for that input. So thank you again, Caroline, for your report. And is that okay to note? Okay, fine, lovely. Thank you all very much. Right, we move on now. We've touched on a little bit of this already. End of year performance 23-24 on all social housing KPIs, which is pages 34 to 45. And our presenting officers, Marie Royal, who's Service Director for People. And I would like to warmly welcome this evening Tracy Chambers, Head of Housing and Community. So welcome joining us for your first time this evening, and also Alexis Jobson, Head of Facilities Management. So Maria, over to you. Thank you.
Sorry, I did it before you. Thank you, Chair. I think what I would start by saying is, obviously, historically, the reason this report comes to this committee is, way back in 2020, we brought housing back in-house, and as part of the previous corporate plan, obviously, there were a number of targets that were set around the social housing, and it was important that this committee had that oversight and could scrutinise the performance for bringing those functions in-house. So there is a little bit of overlap between this report and Caroline's previous report. I would also say that this report is purely on the social housing performance. So housing needs register and homelessness does not form part of this report. However, taking on comments from the last scrutiny sub, we've actually planned a series of briefings for councillors. We had the first one a couple of weeks ago on rough sleeping. We've got a homelessness one planned for September and another one planned for November on the housing needs register and allocations. So, if you can, please do join us for those briefings. In terms of the end of year performance, I think that there's been some progress in a lot of the areas, and there's still lots to do in terms of bringing up performance and what we focus on. So when you look at the capital works programme, there was a lot of work put into the planning. There's been spend on underpinning, compliance, refurbishment projects, bathroom and kitchen replacements, window door replacements, and pitch roof replacements. So there's been investment in stock where we knew there was an issue. It's been a more planned approach in terms of procuring those contracts and delivering that targeted work. There's still much more to do in terms of the stock condition surveys. I think we spoke previously about those at these meetings, so we've got additional resource in to do those and continue those stock condition surveys, and that again is important when we're looking at sort of future planned maintenance programmes and applying for retrofit funding as well. So that work stream is moving in the right direction. Compliance remains a priority for us. There's been lots of work done around fire risk assessments, fireworks. We still having some difficulty gaining access to some properties. This is especially where it's more vulnerable people with complex needs. So, we are working with our tenancy team and our repairs team and our contractors to support access into those properties. In terms of the voids, you know, we're really pleased that the void reletting time has improved from the last sort of half-year report that we did. But again, we've got a new contractor in place, a new contract in place, and it's about working with that contractor to make sure that this performance stays good and that we're turning properties round quicker. With voids as well, we've got a new process in place looking at policy voids. So where we've got properties where it's a significant amount of money to actually bring it back up to condition, or there is significant damage in the property, we are looking at these on an individual case-by-case basis. And from a strategic point of view, it's about assessing our stock. Is it fit for purpose? Is it the type of stock that would benefit our tenants moving forward? And what's that cost-benefit analysis of repairing it or disposing of it? And we are, in the next 12 months, working up a plan around what our position is around housing in terms of acquisitions, how we increase stock, how we dispose of stock that's ageing and no longer fit for purpose. So there is that piece of work that's underway this next year. You will know that from committee reports that we are in the process of acquiring a new site with 67 new units. And pleased to say that exchange went through today. So those new properties will be coming online, giving our existing tenants and prospective tenants better quality accommodation in the district. In terms of tenant arrears, I mean, the team have done a fantastic job, bearing in mind we've had the cost of living crisis, so people have been struggling. Bearing in mind that due to the cyber incident, there was many weeks where we couldn't access systems. Actually, they met the performance target, which is quite an amazing feat in terms of that performance. And what I would say is that prevention is embedded in our approach. So it isn't a case of just purely aggressive debt recovery. We've got money and benefit advisors who go out and support people when they're struggling to help them claim benefits that they're entitled to maximise their income. Those money and benefit advisors also work with new tenants. So when they're signing up, part of the sign up is going through their income, affordability, helping them to claim the right benefits at the right time so that they're set up to succeed from the start of the tenancy. We've also got a tenancy sustainment team, so where people are struggling, where they've got complex needs or vulnerabilities, we've got staff who work with those people to support them to access services that they need at the right time. And they've succeeded in 35 cases over the last 12 months in terms of helping them maintain their tenancies. Another part of that work stream is about, again, helping people who are under occupying properties, who are experiencing difficulties managing their properties, to right size. So we help 6 people actually right size their properties, freeing up more or less family accommodation for other people on our waiting list. Another big part of what we do is our engagement with tenants, and every year we are developing that and we are growing that area of work. So we've got a resident engagement panel which is made up of residents. It gives residents a voice. Leaseholders are represented on that group as well. And that group looks at, you know, any policy change that we're thinking of, any performance that we've got that you know would benefit from them inputting into it or scrutinising it. They run their own garden competition and have done for the last couple of years. And they actually form part of a communications group. So we do 2 newsletters a year to tenants, and the tenants actually feed into that communication process as well. We've also got an independent living forum, a disability forum, and we've done a number of community days over the last 12 months. So officers have been out on the ground, they've brought other partners in. It might be Kent Fire and Rescue Service, it might be the CAB, it might be other money and benefit advisors. We've also had our early prevention officer out on site as well, signposting to projects, access to food support and things like that. So the engagement, is really good, and we're continually looking at that and how we can improve it. You will have noticed some of the satisfaction levels from the tenant survey in Caroline's previous report on the corporate plan. So, and with the tenant survey, we're now doing that on an annual basis. And as part of that process, we're saying, last year you said this, actually, in the last 12 months, we've done this. So it's tying that feedback loop as well. In terms of payment of contractual invoices, we haven't met the target, and part of that was around access to systems during the cyber incident. The finance service was very quick to put in workarounds, but obviously those were manual workarounds during that period. I think the last area just to highlight is around sort of complaints. So, we've been here before. I remember the last meeting, I gave my commitment that we would try and turn this around, and we would concentrate on this. So the performance in the latter part of the last 12 months has improved, but it still needs to improve. There is a new Housing Ombudsman complaint handling code that's been published. We've recently completed a self-assessment against that. We've been looking at processes, we've been looking at performance statistics, and we've been looking at how responses are made and some of the learnings from these complaints as well. So what we will do is, once the assessment is able to be uploaded onto the web, we will put in a link to that self-assessment so you can see that document once we've uploaded it. So yes, everybody's working hard. We know the areas where we need to continue to focus on, and happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Marie. That's a really comprehensive report, and again, it's a really good report, and very good to see how far we've come since 2020. Obviously, there are issues in here still. We're all aware of those, and I'm sure we'll get some questions on here this evening. But the overall trend is going in the right direction. And look back to 2020 when we took this back in-house and the situation it was in. So, yeah, many thanks again to you and your team for all the work you've been doing. Does anyone have Councillor Turnbull? Yeah.
Chair, just quickly, thanks very much for that about the complaints. Obviously, that was going to be something that was going to bring up. Could you just clarify what a stage 1 complaint is and what a stage 2 complaint is for me? Because I'm not entirely clear. Thanks.
Hi, yes. So in terms of the stages, so the first process of a complaint, as soon as it comes in from a customer, just as long as it's not a service request, so that is very different. So they're coming in saying, I'd like you to do this, and we don't already know about that, we take that as a service request. But if they genuinely want to complain about the service, that comes in at what we call stage 1. So we have 10 working days to respond to stage 1 complaints from the customers. If following that they're not satisfied, they're advised about stage 2. And then when the stage 2 complaint comes in, we've got 20 working days to respond to the stage 2 complaint. It is a 2-stage process. So once that finishes, if the customer's still not satisfied, at that point, they can go to the Ombudsman. And then we would respond back to the Ombudsman at their request. So it is a 2-stage process. Thank you.
Thank you. And is the new system of reporting, say, from councillors, is that working well, do you think? Or what sort of feedback do you have on the new process for reporting issues and complaints via councillors?
I think Some councillors use it a lot, some councillors don't use it as much. I think the importance of using that service issues inbox is that we have an audit trail. So as soon as something comes in, it can be passed to the right person, that person can be chased, and we've got that audit trail. I think otherwise, you know, the risk is it can sit in people's inboxes, it's not given the priority that it needs. I think that looking back on the trends and the complaints that have come in, one of the biggest issues historically has been communication. And I think a lot of the complaints that we've had, if they'd have been picked up earlier, there might not necessarily be a complaint at the beginning. It could be a service issue. But the common theme has been around communication with tenants. So that's something that, you know, we all three feel very passionately about. It's something that we've talked about when we've been looking at the service improvement plan. There's going to be training, we're redesigning the process, we're re-looking at the templates, and it's making it more streamlined and more controlled so that we've got oversight of everything and we can pick up trends and issues as they arise and then tackle them through service improvements. So yes, it's really important that councillors use that inbox, and hopefully when the service improvements are made and we are monitoring the impact, then hopefully you will see less of the complaints that are coming into your inboxes.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Does anyone else? Oh, Councillor McKenzie.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've had an issue with some of my residents across Surrey and Hurlston recently, where they've had issues with overgrown vegetation in their gardens, overgrown trees, leading to pests and the threat of branches and things damaging their property. I had a look through the KPIs on here and I didn't see anything to do with that. I was just wondering, is there anything relevant here that you and the team are doing about that to maintain gardens, to keep council properties safe in that regard and pest free? Yeah, thank you.
So it is an area that we do have quite a lot of discussions around, because in the tenancy agreement, gardens and pests are the tenant's responsibility to maintain. So clearly our focus is always on those things that we have to focus on from a statutory point of view, compliance and all of those things. So what we do is look at it on a case-by-case basis. We have had a complaint recently where there's been issues in somebody's garden, and we've looked at all of the issues, and we are dealing with the ones that we can see create a health and safety hazard, and we're doing those ones. The other ones we are saying to the tenant, I'm sorry, we're setting out the terms of their tenancy and explaining that to them. So that's the approach that we take. So we're certainly not ignoring them, but we're dealing with them on a case-by-case basis and having to prioritise and have good rationale for why we do spend what are limited funds on things.
Thank you. And anyone else have anything? I just wanted to ask about voids, because I know obviously you've been doing a huge amount on voids and there's a big improvement. But I think one of the things will be to review when the voids targets are reviewed, to look at those again, because I think one of the issues is within this, although it's improving, there are still some voids that are taking a very long time to turn around and then to re-let. So I think that would possibly be an interesting area for us to be looking at, that new policy coming through and reviewing those voids and how that's being managed, so that you know, we can see that there's a continuing improvement, and maybe some information on some of the areas where that performance is struggling. Thank you, that would be helpful. And if there's nothing else, then we're noting this report. And again, I think in the garage policy report as well, if we can just note that as well, Pippa, that sort of goes between the two reports, but it's probably got more to do with this report. So once that's gone through overview and scrutiny and then through cabinet, then that will be a really important one for us to see here. So are we all happy to note that report, and thank you very much. And thank you again. It's a very, very in-depth report, and I would actually recommend that not just the members of this committee read this report, but actually all councillors should read this report. And I'd like to thank you again, Marie, and your team as well for organising the councillor briefings, because they've been very useful, and look forward to the future ones, because obviously this is, you know, really, really important part of the council's services. So thank you very, very much. Okay, so that's noted. So we move to our final report of the evening, pages 46 to 60, which is the Levelling Up Fund quarterly report. And again, this is to note, and we have Caroline Marlowe, Head of Digital Data and Improvement, giving us the update. And I think we're very aware of your voice, Caroline, so please keep it brief. No, I don't mean it in a, I mean, don't feel you've got to speak and affect your voice, you know, because again, and Councillor Cornell's unable to be with us this evening, but again, Councillor Baldock's here, and I'm sure he'll pass anything back, and I will as well if anything comes up. So, yes, over to you, Caroline. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, on both counts. And I have refilled my water, so let's see how we go. But I'll try and take a similar approach. Again, the committee's very familiar with the format of this report. So we've tried to respond to kind of requests from last time and draw out particular areas of interest. There's been little movement on some of those, so we've also rounded it out with a bit more detail just for context there. But the key messages that I really wanted to flag today to committee were, in actually really good, albeit slightly boring news, there have been no changes to what we set out to deliver at the outset to this point. So actually, compared to many of our peers, that's really good news. We're currently in the technical design phase for most sites, which includes the consent application process. The contract packages are in the process of being drafted, ready to go once the consents have been received. We have had consents for Poor Priest's work, Dane John Gardens power install and test pits at various locations. As you can imagine, I think it's 10 of the 13 sites are scheduled ancient monuments, so we need, there's a lot, continues to be a lot of Historic England involvement. But we are starting to see progress on the ground. Test pits are going in the Dane John next week, actually, next month, but it's soon now. So the trenching, is going in there, and UKPN are going to put the power in autumn for us in the Dane John. The money stuff, the financial and the delivery profile does remain draft until those consents have been achieved. So there's an obvious chronology in some of this, and the construction firms submit their delivery profile as part of that tendering process. So at the moment, they are still very well educated estimates in some areas is what I would say. DLUC are aware, and we know that some of that activity is we will need to submit a PAR. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's an alteration request. Might be project alteration request, actually. It's in the report somewhere. But that's all acceptable for changes to that programme as long as we spend all of their money by the 31st of March 2026, because as it says in the report, relatively blanket extensions were granted. Community engagement, I know that's often a point that comes up from the committee, continues really well. We had a third stakeholder event regarding wayfinding recently, and it was very useful. Mock-ups of the main city map and the totem were discussed and broadly well received, and some amendments were taken on board, but a lot of support for the design and the principles, which is great stuff for us. So we know we're going, pardon the pun, in the right direction. So we're just looking at, we're getting into detail now about what we actually put on maps, and that's always more politics than this chamber, to be honest. At the moment, I suppose the main risks to the project would be if we do find archaeology, which is always a risk, or however, depending on if you're not a risk, a wonderful thing. Business disruption, particularly next summer around the scheduling, and we can control our own car parks and things like that, but KCC obviously can control road closures and things, so working very closely with them. We're very cognizant still that we need to factor in ongoing maintenance or revenue costs of the interventions that we put in as part of the capital works. And yeah, just potentially slippage with some of those things that might take us beyond the March 2026. But as I say, at the moment, we are pretty confident that that's not likely to be the case, and I will stop.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Caroline. And thank you for this report. I don't know if the committee is happy with this report, if you feel there's anything missing from it that you want put back in, but I feel that it's a much more useful report for us, and it really drills down into the areas that we're interested in. But I'm sure if we find there's something, then we can stick it back in a bit. Councillor Mellish.
Sorry, Chair. A small thing, really. Just on the Dulac progress report, do we get sight of that, or is it any different than what you've just presented to us? Because it sounds quite interesting, to see how things are progressing every 6 months or so.
I'm glad my finance colleagues aren't here because it's mainly maths. It's not as qualitative as this. It doesn't kind of have that context. They are mainly concerned, absolutely rightly, that we are on track for budget within the tolerances that, yeah.
Okay, that's good. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Prentice.
I just want to say it's a great report. It's really helpful, and I think we're beginning to see the evidence of the things you talk about within it. I noticed yellow markings in Greyfriars Gardens, which I'm assuming are test pits or something similar. And I noticed the scaffolding by the Poor Priest Hospital as well. So it's great to see all of this coming to life and happening. And it's all what we can see in front of us adds to what we can read in the report. So it's really helpful.
Thank you. Those would be surveys everywhere. Yes, but I thank you very much for those comments. I'll pass them back to the team. It is lovely to start to see things happening on and in the ground. It is as a team of officers.
Next thing. But yeah, no, it's very good. What I wanted to ask was about the Story Gardens, because the consultation's just finished, hasn't it? Is there any feedback on that, Caroline, on what was coming through and what the next stages will be and how they get selected?
That's lit, as you say, Councillor Carnett, that's recently closed, so that work is happening right now. They're looking at those. I would imagine that will be in quite some detail at the next report, yeah, and maybe hopefully some pictures, some visuals as well.
Yeah, that would be really good. So I look forward to that coming back in the next report. So if everyone is okay, then we can note this report. And yes, thank you very much. It's a really, I think it's a usable report for us now, and gives us a lot of information. And again, I'd recommend that all councillors are reading through that, because it gives a good overview of what's happening with the LUF. So, right, we are at the end of our meeting then. So, date of next meeting is 7 p.m. on Wednesday, the 11th of September, when we will have the Park and Ride report coming to us and some transport. So, yeah, that will be exciting. I mean it. We've been waiting for this. This is the first thing our committee has actually developed ourselves, our own report. Anyway, so we're looking forward to that. So enjoy your summers. Hope you all have great holidays and the sunny weather lasts, and you've got feet left at the end of next week. And yes, and fingers too, feet and fingers. So it's 8:30, so I wish you all a good evening, and thank you to the officers and to Councillor Baldock for being here. Thank you very much.